In this video, a full review of the first high-quality, affordable motion simulator available from DOF Reality, introducing the P3 with traction loss. And yes, we're in love. In a world where motion simulators are just fantasy for normal blue-collar folks like us, costing thousands of dollars and honestly, best left for malls, arcades, and really rich people. Based in Ukraine and Canada lies a small motion simulator company. Enter DOF Reality. They brought to the table a line of motion simulator platforms that are probably cheaper than honestly the price of your gaming PC. Like finally, a company brings a true motion sim rig at a price the everyday gamer can swallow. Better yet, if funds are really slim, DOF Reality gives you the ability to build as you go with options to upgrade without having to buy a new rig. Let's get this out of the way right now. I purchased this with my own money. I did not receive any special treatment from DOF Reality. I paid full price all the way across. Regardless of how I come to own an item for review, you will always get my unbiased, honest opinions on any product you see on my channel, period. Besides, I'm hoping, honestly, that DOF likes this video and considers sending me their new M2, 2 degrees of motion simulator. It rivals the Next Level Racing butt mover, and it's like $1,000, which is a third of the cost of the Next Level Racing butt mover. So not to mention that they just came out with a new 6 degree of freedom full motion rig. Literally, like, you get all 6 axes. I mean, that is insane. So yeah. Anyway, back to the P3. The model I chose, which included traction loss, that I purchased. So it's been almost a year of ownership. Purchased it in March of 2018. And honestly, I think I've now used it enough to put forth this full review. From purchase to delivery took roughly 3 weeks. It came in 2 boxes. Both were relatively large, but honestly, they were manageable. Instructions that were included in the box were honestly faded. They were kind of difficult to understand. But luckily, they also send you digital instructions, which are completely amazing. There's also full assembly videos on YouTube. Took me roughly 6 hours or so to put it together. I was also taking my time, really enjoying myself. I'm sure that you could put it together faster if, it was your goal. The great thing about DOF Reality is they give you the option of not purchasing a seat. And it's actually huge because it saves you on shipping and allows you to source your own seat and, seat track, seat, slider, the bracket. I do recommend purchasing them together, and I recommend purchasing them before you buy the rig. DOF Reality, they custom build, somewhat these, and they did email me and ask me, specifics on how far apart my bolts were and things like that. So I would recommend purchasing it. That way everything fits. I ended up just reusing my GT Omega RS9 seat from my old sim chassis. Once the motion simulator was completely put together and in its place, all wired up, the last piece of the puzzle is to actually get the software to talk to the hardware. This is where a program called SimTools comes in, which, by the way, DOF Reality includes the licensing with purchase. Within 2 hours, I was good to go playing Project Cars 2 in full motion thanks to their awesome instructions through the emails and all that. You don't have to be a computer nerd to make this thing work, but I do recommend, you have some kind of knowledge in, turning on video games and using computers. It can involve quite a bit of patience, especially for certain games. Understand that we're all guinea pigs here. This is new technology at a fraction of the cost of, expensive simulators. And honestly, it's all about the software. DOF Reality doesn't make the software. Listen, a motion simulator is only as good as the software. It's telling the motors what to do, when to do it, how far to do it, how fast. You get the idea. Another thing you may not know is it doesn't stop at the SimTool software. Each game requires a plugin to work, which must be installed in your PC. Now, these plugins are written by people like you and me, interpreting game data to allow the motion. Provided, of course, that the game developer even decided to allow motion or allow access to the numbers for motion. So some are more well-written than others. All of this and more can be found on their website at www.xsimulator.net, and you can check that link in the description. Quality seems to be very high for the price. All metal is powder-coated steel. All bolts and nuts are polished and heavy-duty. No rusting has occurred whatsoever. Once assembled, it's very solid and definitely is very stable and not tippy at all. When you're not using the motion, i.e. playing a game that doesn't require motion, the rig is still very solid and does not move around. Now, DOF Reality, they also offer an economy version of this exact rig. Instead of the P3, it's the H3. Now, it uses smaller, less expensive motors to power the simulator. Otherwise, they are exactly the same. It's really just the motor. Now, I chose the P3, which uses motors for, commercial use, especially after watching Johnny Tech Gear's video. He had the review on where he mounted triple monitors to the rig. And after watching this, I kind of knew that if it could handle the weight of all of that, then it could handle the custom wheel stand that I planned to add with tons of accessories. After owning the P3, I'm really curious about how Johnny's making out with that design, as honestly I probably wouldn't recommend trying to copy it. Balance is very important in this rig, and stress. So too much stress on the motors can definitely shorten their lifespan, and they're expensive to replace. So you can imagine DOF Reality wouldn't want to warranty a motor that was put through such stress, as obviously DOF Reality never intended it to be used, that way. Now we're going to go into the pros and cons list with detailed explanations. Now, I do apologize for the length of this review, but when you're spending this much money for something that you really don't know that much about, I kind of felt like it was necessary to point out everything I could and cover as much as absolutely possible. So first up, the pros. Now, first up, we're going to talk about price. So I get it, $2,500 for the P3 is technically expensive, but if you look at the grand scheme of life for a motion simulator, it is definitely not expensive at all. When you consider, its competitors are, let's say, the Next Level Racing, which is only a butt mover. It's not a full motion, and that's $3,000. And then the next one that would even be somewhat comparable would be like a ProSim U, which has the noisy actuators, and is, if you want to upgrade it later, you got to spend a lot more up front for the expensive motors. And then you go into something like a D-Box, which is like, $16,000. So price is definitely a positive here for a full motion racing simulator, flying simulator. You get it. Now, the second pro that I want to talk about is the fact that it is a full motion simulator, meaning the entire rig moves, including your legs, the pedals, the wheels, everything moves as one. So it's like a real car. Whereas, some of the competition is just a butt mover. All it does is move your seat around, where the pedals stay stationary and the wheels stay stationary. And I don't know if you've ever driven a real car before, but that's not the way that it works. So pro definitely for the full motion. Now we're going to go into number 3. Now that is upgradability. Now if you're a little short on cash, you could get the P2 to start. It's basically the commercial version with no traction loss. You could then later add traction loss, which is basically just a frame addition and another motor. And then even if you wanted to upgrade to the P6, I guess that's what they're going to call it, the 6 DOF, then you would just have to buy 3 more motors and another box or whatever, and it's like another upgrade. So you don't have to go crazy in the beginning. You could build it over time. Now, when I was looking at probably the closest competitor, which is the ProSim UT1000 3DOF, I was looking at their website, and if you really pay attention, it shows on there that if you plan to go 5DOF or upgrade it at some point, they recommend buying the more expensive motors right from the start. That way you're not throwing money away later. So that just ups the price from the very beginning. Now, this is not the case with the DOF Reality. You can choose the H2, H3, H6, and you can upgrade along the way. Or you can get the commercial version, the P2, the P3, the P6, unlike ProSim U, where you have to buy the expensive motors if you plan to upgrade to 5DOF. So that's a big concern to think about. And while we're talking about ProSim U, they use like a SC6 pneumatic type actuator instead of like a electric type motor like the DOF Reality uses. And while it is a little bit faster, it is extremely noisy, and I'm pretty sure that I would blow my brains out if I had to listen to that all day long. I mean, go watch some of their videos. It's yeah, no thank you. So that is a big pro in my book. Now, the other big thing is this is a great do-it-yourself base. Like if you were looking for a racing simulator, so that way you could kind of do what you wanted and build off of it and already have like some of the really hard work done. This is a great, base starting point for you. It's basically what I did. You can clearly see that I added a bunch of stuff to it to make it mine and make it even more awesome. So do-it-yourselfers, it's going to be awesome because trust me, I looked originally to purchase and buy and build, custom my own racing simulator with wiper motors and all kinds of crazy stuff. And let me tell you, it is difficult. There's not as much information out there that you would think. And in the end, I was still going to end up spending somewhere near $1,500 to make it happen. And at that point, it became more of a gamble, where I knew I could just buy this pre-factory done and have an amazing time, and I'm so glad I made that decision. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the fact that this thing is just a showstopper. I mean, anywhere that you would take this thing, you'd have people lining up to use it. When I have friends over or family or people that have never seen it, I mean, it literally blows their minds when they're using it. And let's not forget that it includes the Sim Tools license, which is awesome. I mean, who wants to pay extra for something if it's going to be included, right? So big bonus there. You're getting Sim Tools. It definitely runs with a minor CPU load. So if you have like a weaker type computer, you're definitely going to be able to still run this motion, because honestly, it doesn't really use any like graphical or CPU power. So you're not really taking away from like your gameplay. Another thing is VR with this rig is simply amazing. I mean, there is no way to describe it. When you're using triple screens, it's still amazing, don't get me wrong, but there's a piece of you that's still in reality. When you go into the VR, into the virtual reality, I mean, you can't see anything. So the rig's moving around, and it is just an experience that has to be experienced to understand. So rattle off some more pros here. So again, there's personalized for you seat bolts and mounting locations, and they kind of ask you what shifter you're using and what wheel or what you're using, so they can try to do their best to make sure that you don't have to like drill a bunch of holes if it's completely unnecessary. To be honest, if you look at some of the larger full motion simulators, they're pretty big. This is, although it is large, it's not huge. And it's honestly compact compared to like some of the other ones, like the Sim Experience and some of those. So overall, it is technically compact. I mean, I'm not saying you could like jam it into a closet or anything, but it definitely could take up a little bit of space if you were really crammed for it. And then if you've watched any of my other videos and you've seen the quiet test that we did, I mean, it is just breathtaking how quiet this thing runs. You could definitely use it all night long in like an apartment or something like that, as long as you had headphones and didn't have any like crazy vibration, speakers or anything like that. You could definitely get away with using it when it's quiet. Another is it's got a lot of movement. You may not be able to really realize, but compared to a lot of other sim rigs, including some of the really expensive ones and some of the cheaper ones, this has like literally 3 times as much movement as those do. And trust me, that matters. So yeah, lots of movement, and you can clearly see it in the videos. Go watch the other videos of the other ones you're considering, and you'll see the difference. So with that, you also get to decide how much motion you want. Through SimTools, the program, you can choose to add, more or less motion and how fast it moves. So let's say if you're going to have kids or something, you can turn the motion down but still give them that experience. So another positive. Again, quality overall, really nice bolts. The powder coating, that's a good pro in my opinion. It was easy to assemble. It was very fast to assemble. That's awesome. Good instructions throughout was definitely made my life really easy, because I tell you what, this stuff can be difficult, and instructions are lifesavers. One of the best pros on here is definitely traction loss, and I mean, it is almost a must for racing and driving games. It just adds so much extra that really can't be understood until you try it. You physically can feel the tires breaking traction underneath of you, and you can feel the car sliding out, and it really helps your driving, and it's really fun. So I mean, if you're into flying, traction loss therefore becomes kind of useless, and I usually turn it off in those types of games. So if you're definitely never going to be doing any racing or driving, then skip the traction loss and save yourself some money. Another pro is they have A+ customer support. Now, I've never talked to them on the phone, but I mean, they answer their emails within like an hour or two, and they are awesome. Awesome to help, which is, again, very helpful when you're setting up something that you don't really know about. And then while we're talking about awesome people, over at xsimulator.net, they are awesome. It's a forum, and everyone is courteous. Everyone is nice. There's no BS. You go there for what you need, which is to keep motion sims and plugins and games and talk about it. And it seems to be very well moderated. And big shout out to them, because I mean, that community has helped me so much through all of this. Another pro is, again, there's no seat included, which is going to save you money in the long run. Another pro is it does fit a wide range of people, from like basically like small adults to like really large. I've had 6'5", 300-pound people in the sim rig, and really tested everything, and it still worked. So definitely will fit a wide variety of people. And lastly, the last pro that I can think of at the moment is it just adds so much realism and depth to all of your racing, flying, space games. I mean, it's unbelievable. And now that brings me to the cons. And unfortunately, you always wish that there wouldn't be cons, but come on, what kind of honest video doesn't have some cons in it? So let's talk about some of them. The first problem that I had with the DOF Reality is it's got a tall profile. It's a little taller than like your standard sim chassis is going to be. It's like higher off the ground. And I had a problem. I had a custom make monitor stand extra tall to accommodate the excessive height of the stand. So that's something to take into consideration if you have existing hardware. Another con is obviously when you add things to this, you have to account for balance. So there is a little thought involved sometimes, in balancing the rig, especially when putting peripherals and things off to the side. And although it does have, some adjustability for, peripherals and things can be moved around a little bit, it is still kind of limited for different peripherals if you're trying to put on multiple things. Like, let's say that if you're flying and racing, it can be complicated trying to swap from one to the other quickly anyway. Also, it although it is small, and it was in the pros that it's kind of small, it also is kind of large, so it does require a semi-large space. That's kind of a pro and a con depending on your situation. Another is it's difficult for kids to use that are, really, really small. My 8-year-old son is not quite tall enough to reach the pedals, and because of that, we end up putting a pillow behind him, and then now he doesn't have the bolster of the seat to kind of hold him in, so I have to really make sure that I turn the motion way down so he doesn't go flying out of the rig, obviously. So another is the software is, it is, I guess, finished, but it's technically like beta almost. So there is patience required, when trying to put plugins to new games. Like I said, some games within minutes you're playing, so simple, and other games just fight you along the way and take a long time to get the motion to work properly. It's just one of those things, unfortunately. Another is the shipping is a little expensive. I think I paid somewhere around $300 to have it shipped to America, and I realize that's probably not all them. There's a crating fee, there's the box material, and then of course, DHL or whoever delivered it is also getting, a big chunk of that. But still, regardless, it is a con. It's $300 shipping. It's a lot of money. And I guess shipping varies depending on where you live, but that's what I ended up paying. And then there was a 3-week delivery time, which again, to me, is not a big deal. I mean, that could almost go on a positive. But for some people, they want it now. 3 weeks would be too long to wait. But again, it's going, halfway across the world, so I'm just not going to complain about that. But again, it's on the list. Another is the motors are not as fast as actuators. So although they don't make that crazy sound, they are a little slower, and that just is what it is. It's not so slow to where you're not happy. So what's the big deal? I mean, you can clearly see in all of these videos that it's more than responsive. So yes, I guess it could be more responsive, but again, that's something that's on this cons list. Another is the wires that go from the motors to the box, I think could be like about 2 foot longer, and it would really help you place the little box thing that goes with it more out of the way. It's actually, they're so short that I kind of have to have it on the floor right next to the sim rig, and I'd really like to have everything tucked away the way I've designed it. And it would be nice if those wires were just a little bit longer, even if maybe you could pay a little extra and have it be an option for the, I know you want to keep costs down, but I'm willing to pay a little bit more for that kind of a convenience. Another is it really needs some kind of rubber feet, maybe right from the factory, for them to install rubber feet on it so that way it doesn't slide around as much. It does have like a plastic foot, but it will slide around as you use it. So I ended up just taking some pieces of rubber. I had some old pond liner lying around, and I put them underneath the feet, and it took care of it. No problem whatsoever. Very happy with it. But it would be nice if maybe they shipped with a rubber right from the door so that way it doesn't slide all over the place. So a few more little cons to talk about before we get into like the larger issues that I have. Power consumption, it doesn't seem to use a ton of watts. I'm sure it's not like killing my electric bill. But if you are very electric conscious and you don't have a lot of electricity to spare, maybe trying to run like a direct drive motor with a full motion rig and your PC and 3 monitors, like you might be pushing the limits. So that's just something to consider. I'm sure it's using some power powering those motors. Another is one thing I do miss, and it's not that I miss it because I never had it, but like when I'm driving, I miss it for some reason. I wish that I was getting all the suspension travel. When you drive in a real car, it's like you kind of bounce up and down. Whereas on this, your butt doesn't really move. It just kind of stays where it is, and the front of the car kind of bounces up and down. I just kind of wish the whole car bounced by itself, and I realize you can't do that with 3DOF. You need like a 5DOF or a 6DOF to simulate a full bounce effect. But that is something that I find that I miss. Is it enough for me to say I don't want it? No, because I barely notice it. The only time I notice it is on long straightaways. You're like, oh, it'd be nice if I could feel like something at this point, because it just gets monotonous if there's too many long straightaways. But again, just minor, you know. Another thing is, if you think you're going to be faster on the racetrack, it's definitely not the case. I find that my lap times are usually slower when I'm running with especially with high levels of motion. So it's a matter of, are you happier with the full motion and experiencing it, or are you trying to be competitive and then finding a happy medium where you have a little bit of motion and you're still competitive? So that's another thing to definitely think about. You know, another con is obviously not every game supports motion. So you have to make sure that you pick a game that does have motion. Steam's going to be your best friend. For the most part, on the DOF Reality website, they do list the majority of games that can be used. And, honestly, that list is always growing. But also realize as a con that motion can come and go. A developer could do an update and completely wipe out your settings, and you'll have to figure it out again if you even can. So that's a con that you might have to think about. And to be honest, while we're talking about games that have no motion are ruined. If the game suddenly doesn't have motion, like let's say that I'm playing iRacing or something that has, or Project Cars 2 that has a lot of motion, and I'm just loving every second of it, then I want to go play a game like maybe Wreckfest or something that's really fun, but doesn't have motion. I miss the motion so bad that if the game is not epic, I won't play it. Now, Wreckfest is an exception because it's just so fun, but it's just one of those things where it just kind of ruins you. You just can't play without it anymore. And now I'm going to move along to probably the largest cons in my opinion. I have a few here that are, a little bit larger than the others. The first thing we're going to talk about is the alleged foot plate weakness. Now, if you've seen anything or done any research, you'll see there's a guy who had his collapse on them, and it actually broke, and he ended up welding it all back together himself. And DOF Reality did come out and say, hey, listen, we'll make it right, as well as reinforcing the way that they put them together. Now, I've never had this problem myself at all. I have always kind of supported that area just a little bit, whether it be with like aluminum strips or now with the 80/20 aluminum, just to be on the absolute safe side, because I do have a heavy foot sometimes. Now, my next con is, of course, you got to take it for what it is. It's an entry-level type, cheaper. They make, the upper portion of it is definitely made a little cheaper, and it's just to keep the cost down. So my little gripe is with the wheel stand. It's, it's a little shaky, it's a little creaky, it's a little flexy. It was making some noise, as you can hear right now. So I'm going to play it. Here you go. Now, this, of course, is not a deal breaker, and there's things you can do to improve it. You can try to sturdy it up, but again, just something that I am bringing to your attention. So another little problem that I came up with was, as far as USB. So the USB goes out of the little box and goes into your computer. Now, apparently, it is extremely picky on where you put that when you first install it. And if you try to move it later, your sim rig will not work, and you'll have to mess with things and inside the software to get it to work again. It is very particular on the port that you use. So you're going to want to make sure that you keep the wire plugged into the same port the entire time that you end up using it. Now, another issue that came up even in Johnny Tech Gear's video is that he ended up cracking one of his plastic wheels. Now, none of mine have cracked, and I still have the same wheels from the original unit. There's a ton of that white dust everywhere, but believe it or not, there's still a ton of wheel left, like not even enough to be slightly concerned. It's just messy. So I'm not really sure what material that they were using when they first shipped these, but from what I've heard, they have now switched to a different plastic, which doesn't do that. And in awesomeness of DOF Reality, they even sent me a replacement set of the new wheels. And lazy me, I just haven't had a chance to actually like try to figure out how to get them installed because the other ones haven't failed yet. Now here is my biggest gripe with the entire unit, and something that I think should definitely be made aware, and something should be done to fix it altogether. Some kind of Velcro strap or something. You can see what I've done is I've actually tied some wire, some speaker wire, right to the center there where the bolt goes down and through, and the whole rig actually pivots off of that point. That's in the very front of the rig, so that pivots right there. Now when you install everything, you build the upper portion and the lower portion, and then you connect the two, and the only way they are connected is through that bearing. It's not a bolt, but we'll say it's a bolt, and it pivots off of that point. So you drop it down onto that bolt, and that's where it pivots from. So everything's fine, no issues. I used it for quite a few days with zero issues and had a great time with it. However, I had a friend come over who's around 300 pounds and 6'5", and he had to put the seat back quite a bit more than I do. And we had the motion turned up probably more than it should have been, and we were able to completely rock the entire upper section off of the lower section. And honestly, it was kind of scary, and I think there should be some kind of little strap or something just to prevent that from happening. And ever since I've put that wire there, it has not happened. And I've had my 6'5", 300-pound friend come over, and he has used it many times and never had that issue again, because now the upper section can't pop off of the lower section. So again, huge thing to think about. I really hope DOF Reality does something about this. But knowing that a simple speaker wire will do the trick, again, not a deal breaker. So those are all the cons I could really come up with over the course of, almost a year now. So what I have are a few questions. So first, why do you buy something like this? The answer? Because you like racing and or flying like a lot, and you plan on using it, because if you're going to buy it and not use it, it's a waste. So you obviously have to like gaming, you have to like computers, you have to have some patience. I mean, these are obvious things, but seriously. So seriously, the question is, why do you buy something like this? Number one, maybe you own some kind of VR business or something, and you just want to try to sell, like almost rent seat time in it. With the commercial version, this would be an excellent choice if you are trying to do that and set this up in some kind of mall or something and do it at a reasonable price. Another thing, and you can have your wives listen to this if they need, if you're trying to convince them to purchase this. Race cars are expensive, okay? Like way more expensive than you will ever spend on this sim rig. And racing is expensive. Even once you have your car, it is expensive. And let's not forget, it is extremely dangerous. You're not going to kill yourself crashing into a wall in a DOF Reality motion simulator. Okay? And the same goes for airplanes and helicopters. Same thing. They're both expensive, and they are both dangerous. So you can literally live that dream in that motion. And if you ever were so interested to play like a game like Elite Dangerous, if you're not aware of it, it's a space sim in which they recreated our actual solar system, and you can fly around in it, and you can go to the moon, and it is just epic. And the motion works. It's amazing. So you obviously are a dedicated gamer, and you're looking for the most immersive experience that you can possibly come up with, then those are the reasons why you would buy something like this. Another question that I get a lot in emails are, do I recommend it? And yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm so happy that I have this thing. I'm very lucky to even have it. I mean, I'm sure there's people that are drooling over that thing and wish they could own it. It is awesome. It's breathtaking. I've had zero issues with it. Everything runs cool, runs smooth, other than the little things I've talked about. But I mean, overall, like super happy. And I would wholeheartedly recommend that if you have the ability to figure out a way to get one, do it. You will not be dissatisfied, and you know you'll have the time of your life, basically. So third, would I buy it again, knowing everything that I know now? And the answer still is most definitely. Because again, we talked about the competition. I'm actually going to do a video about all the different sim rigs that are available and why this one probably is the best. But do the research yourself, you know, or save yourself some time and just buy this one. That's up to you, because I've done the research. I mean, but knowing what I know, absolutely, for the price and what you get and the experience and how amazing it is, yeah, no doubt whatsoever. And my last question is, you know, do you really need this? Like, is this something that is required or mandatory? And my answer is no. Obviously, this is, you know, the top end of high-end electronics. A very small category of people care about racing or flying that much that they're willing to dedicate the time, the effort, the money to do this. But understand that if you are that person, the rewards are just like immense, to where you're going to feel so satisfied and want to fly, want to drive, and you're going to want to use it. So, you know, it's just one of those things. It really comes down to you. What is your budget? And, you know, can you justify spending that much money on a motion rig? If you have the money, again, I recommend it. So I've rambled on for, I know, more than a half hour, and I do apologize, but I wanted to make sure that this was, you know, a lot of information for the serious buyer who's interested in, you know, anything from DOF Reality. Thank you very much for watching. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, whatever other, you know, hoops YouTube's trying to make you jump through. But I definitely appreciate it. I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.